The focus of all challenges to the Ecuadorian verdict has been Alberto Guerra. My job at the trial was to do a deep dive into Alberto Guerra and all of the various statements he had given over time. Did he change his story over time? Did he have corroborating evidence? Was he credible? Guerra was a disgraced judge who had been fired for misconduct. Guerra was in financial trouble when he approached Chevron. He had $146 in the bank, he owed money on the construction of his house, and he was $50,000 in debt. He needed money, and he thought up of a story that he could sell. The first thing Alberto Guerra did is he went to Chevron, and he met the Chevron representative, who was a lawyer, in the El Chacal restaurant. And he said, Chevron, if you pay me money, I will make sure that we bring the verdict for you, that you will win the verdict. And Chevron said no. Then Judge Guerra went to the plaintiffs, and he went to Pablo Fajardo, and he went to Steven Donziger, and he met Steven Donziger at the Honey restaurant. He said the same thing. If you give me money, I will make sure you get the verdict. And Steven Donziger did exactly what Chevron did. And he said, no, we will not participate in a verdict that is based on bribery. Miraculously, a couple of weeks later, Judge Guerra is talking to Judge Zambrano, and Judge Zambrano says, hey, I've made a deal with the plaintiffs, and they're going to pay me $500,000 for this verdict. There is no corroboration to that conversation. There is not a single document, email, information, nothing that corroborates Guerra's testimony that Zambrano actually reached a deal with the plaintiff other than Guerra's testimony. The first question to ask was, how much money would Guerra get from this scheme that supposedly Judge Zambrano had made on his own with the plaintiffs? First time Guerra talks about it, he says he has no idea how much money he would get. Second time he talked about it, which was under oath in front of Judge Kaplan in the RICO trial in New York, Guerra says, oh yes, I had a deal with Judge Zambrano, I was going to get 20% of the money. Third time he testified under oath, which was at the arbitration panel, he turned to the arbitration panel and he said, oh, I lied about that. I didn't have a deal on 20%. I didn't have any idea what I would get. I just hoped that if Judge Zambrano got the money, he would give me some of it and I would get a benefit. But the important part then starts of how did the verdict get written? Because this is the crux of Guerra's testimony. He came to Chevron with details. And he said, I can tell you exactly how the verdict was written, and I can tell you why the plaintiffs were involved, because I was involved in it. So the first story was that on Friday, January 29th, a very specific day, Guerra met Judge Zambrano at the Quito airport. Left his house, went to the airport to pick up a flash drive. Judge Zambrano told him that on the flash drive was the verdict. He went back to his house, sat at his own desk, worked on his own computer, and wrote and edited the verdict over the weekend. He did not talk to Judge Zambrano the entire weekend, did not interact with Judge Zambrano. He said there was no reason for it. At the end of the weekend, he put the verdict back on the flash drive, went back to the airport, and handed it to Judge Zambrano. The problem is that story didn't hold up because Chevron brought a duffel bag full of cash, $18,000 in cash, and handed it over to Guerra, a fact witness, and said, for this cash and this brand new laptop with the best make and model, we would like your computer so we can prove the verdict was typed on your computer. But when the analysis was done, the verdict was not on his computer. So Guerra changed his story. Story number 2 is that 2 to 3 weeks before the verdict, he didn't stay at his house in Quito, but in fact he got on a bus and he drove all the way across the country to Lago Agria from Quito. He got off the bus and went to stay at Judge Zambrano's apartment for the weekend. When he arrived, the verdict was on Pablo Fajardo's laptop. And he worked and stayed at Zambrano's apartment. He worked only a few hours over the 2 days. He maintained phone contact with Judge Zambrano throughout the weekend and even had dinners with him where they discussed what was going on with the verdict, and he left the edited verdict on Pablo Fajardo's laptop. So now the story of the memory aid. The first story that Guerra came up with about how he got this memory aid document was that Pablo Fajardo had emailed it to him over the weekend while he was at his house in Quito. He had a printer, he printed it, that's why he had a copy of it to hand over to Chevron for $10,000 in cash, which is what Chevron paid him for it. But then he changed his story because now suddenly he's in Lago Agria for the weekend. So how did the memory aid come? So story number 2 was, oh no, I forgot. I received it by email from Pablo Fajardo in Lago Agria, but because Judge Zambrano does not have a printer, I left Judge Zambrano's apartment, walked all the way to an internet cafe, received it by email at the internet cafe, and printed it there. That was story number 2. But when Chevron looked through Guerra's emails, there was not a single email to or from Pablo Fajardo. And in fact, Guerra did not even have Pablo Fajardo's email address anywhere in his contacts, and it was not recognized by the computer. So Guerra changed his story again. Story number 3 was he stayed the whole weekend in Judge Zambrano's apartment in Lago Agria, and at one point there was a knock on the door. Pablo Fajardo came to the door. When he opened it, he was handed the document physically by Pablo Fajardo, and that's why he had it. 3 completely different stories, and each one absolutely having nothing in common with the other. Then Guerra got on Chevron's payroll. And the first thing he said was, I have to leave Ecuador. I need to be in the US. And I will tell you more if you bring me to the US. So Chevron paid for Guerra to leave Ecuador. Guerra, his wife, his son's wife, and his grandchildren. They were given hotel rooms, and when they got bored in the hotel rooms, Chevron then got them homes. They were given car and car insurance, health insurance for the entire family, $12,000 towards appliances and furnishings for the house, and an immigration lawyer to represent all of them and make sure that they could keep immigration status in the US. Then the punchline. Guerra wanted money every month to live on. And so Chevron paid someone who had formerly made $500 to $600 a month, $12,000 a month. That started 6.5 years ago, and Guerra has been on the Chevron payroll, making $12,000 a month for more than 6 years. In preparation for Guerra to testify in the New York RICO case, Chevron flew him from Miami to New York every Sunday. He met with the Chevron lawyers to prepare for his testimony starting Monday morning, and he met all day, Monday through Friday, for 3 months to prepare him to testify at one trial. I guess they had to figure out how to get all these stories to try and come together, and they just don't. But a crucial day came when he was in trial testifying in the RICO case, and Chevron's lawyers asked him to identify Steven Donziger in the courtroom. He focused on a person and he described them and said, it's the man sitting behind the woman wearing red. I was wearing red, and sitting right behind me was my law partner, Rainey Booth. The judge, recognizing that Guerra had actually identified one of the lawyers in the case, said on the record, is the translation correct? Is he really identifying the person behind the woman in red? And it was confirmed he was. But then the judge's verdict came out, and he called Guerra an impressive witness. He said Guerra came across well on the stand. And when the judge described the amount of money and benefits that Chevron had provided a fact witness, when it's not lawful to actually pay a fact witness for testimony, he called it a private witness protection program created for Guerra by Chevron. To date, Chevron has paid Guerra over $1 million. Chevron has bought Guerra's stories that are inconsistent, cannot be reconciled, and are not even remotely similar.